Hey everybody, thanks for watching. Today is the day we're gonna put this engine back in this vehicle, get it all buttoned up, and fire it up for the first time. So we're gonna get the engine off of the stand. Let's bolt this on real quick. All right, so I actually turned the engine around because it's gonna go in this way, so this is the back. We'll put our piece on. All right, now we unbolt it from the stand. All right, so putting our rear main seal on, there's the two case halves, and right where that seam comes together, I'm gonna put just a little blotch of RTV before putting the seal in. Doesn't take a lot. The seal is a really tight fit. Just gonna put a little bit on there. All right, then we just tap it on. Oh, the inside of the seal, we wanna put a little lubricant so it'll go over the back of the crank. A little silicone paste works really well. You just tap it in. So the top half, there's a stop. So you just press it in until it stops on the top, and then you make the bottom the same. So it'll be just recessed in. Make sure it looks even. All right, now we're ready for our flywheel. So if you have the automatic transmission, Toyota calls this a drive plate ring gear, typically what we call a flywheel. So first we got this plate, has a little dowel. We line it up with that one. Then on here, we're just putting it back. We have a witness mark here where this little dimple is on that plate we just put in. So we're just gonna line it up that way. Otherwise, it doesn't look like there's any alignment marks or any way to align it. So it may not need it, but, and then our last plate, and this doesn't look like it matters. Now with our bolts, we want to clean them up really good, and then we'll install Loctite. Red Loctite, not the blue Loctite. All right, just a little bit on the threads. I might be out of this one. Oh, there it goes. That was a lot. And the torque spec I have is 72 foot-pounds. One. And you tighten it kind of like a tire pattern. And there's 8 lugs, or 8 bolts. All right, now we're gonna pull the car underneath it, lower it in, and get it all set. All right, the engine is in. I didn't realize my microphone died on us, so I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of recap and highlight some of the tips and struggles that I was having. All right, so first off, that motor mount in the front, that transmission mount, leave it bolted. I unbolted it so I can get more lift on the transmission, but what ends up happening is the transmission sways over to the side and it doesn't quite line up. I was having a lot of trouble lining up the engine with the bell housing of the transmission a lot of it due to that. So just bolt it back in. Still a good idea to jack up the front of the belt housing of the transmission, but leave that on. So that's important. Other than that, as you're dropping it in, this harness here, you just have to finesse it around and back up because it does go across the top of the engine. So that was the only other thing. Other than that, it came in. You just have to make sure you're the right level, the right tilt and angle and everything. And you get these dowels in. There's a dowel, I think, somewhere around here, and then there's a dowel on the other side. Once those line up, it'll pretty much just kind of fall into place. What you don't want to do is take a bolt and thread it in and try to suck it in before it's ready. And you can damage some things, especially the flywheel, if it's getting bound up on something before it's ready to go in, or the torque converter or something like that before it's all ready to slide into place. It'll fall in and you'll go, ah, yeah, nice. And then we can go ahead and put our bolts in. So we got our bolts in. That'll be next, is just bolting the transmission up, going underneath, bolting the flywheel up to the torque converter. And then we got our front motor mount on, but we'll bolt and tighten all that stuff up. So I put this on, just a side note, I put this on first. I'd go ahead and leave it off if you want to torque this nut for the exhaust. Otherwise, you just have to use it for a wrench. So we could torque all these, but I'll get a good wrench feel on that one instead of a torque spec. I think other than that, right now it's just a matter of buttoning everything back together. Again, we'll start with the transmission bolts, and then we'll go do that wiring harness on the back side, the AC compressor to put on, and then the serpentine belt. So not a whole lot, maybe a few more hours of just buttoning everything back together, the exhaust, the intake, and all that. We'll be ready to fire this beast up. We got all our bell housing bolts tightened up and the flywheel bolts to the torque converter. That's important to put Loctite on those. So that's what they call for, Loctite. Now we're gonna put the exhaust on. So we got a new gasket. It looks like it was leaking. Not sure if the camera picked it up, but all that black soot was from an exhaust leak prior. But we got a new gasket on there, new gasket on there. Now we'll go ahead and set our manifold converter on and bolt that down. The spec I have on the exhaust bolts is 27 foot-pounds. And they're a 12 mil, not a 14. All right, just like anything else, start in the middle. And this bottom one above the alternator, we'll just have to get it the best we can. All right, feels good. We got those two bolts holding the converter onto the engine. Put our heat shield on. Start plugging in our wiring harness stuff. I just want to show you where I am. So I went ahead and just put all this on. It's just plugging hoses in where they go. Yeah, connectors go where they go. This harness back here, this one, there's a bolt down below that secures it to the head. Very hard to get to, but just do your best to try to get it on there. It is clipped on to two different brackets in the back, so you know, it's really secure in there, but just try to get that bolt in there. This right here, that big plastic leg, it goes underneath the cam position sensor. So there's that. I can get put in. This plastic stuff's kind of hard to work with, but do your best. So yeah, just all plugged in. Excuse me. Grounding straps. Be sure that you have all your grounding. There's one down below. I can't see it. It's under here. It belongs to one of these black wires that it grounds through the transmission bolt. So one of the transmission bolts, you want to just try to remember that, you know, don't forget, but also try to put it back where it came from. Grounding is important because there's also electricity flow a certain direction. So if you put a ground in the wrong spot, now electricity is flowing through the block and through the head differently, than designed. So we just want to try to put our grounds back where they were. Other than that, so this side is pretty much buttoned up, other than the airbox stuff, which I'll do that last. Got this. We still have this to do here. So still got this to do, and the intake manifold. Kind of dark back here, but I put the power steering pump lines on, and I think that's it. So my next move, I'm not gonna film it just because it does go quicker not filming. And if you took it off, you know how things go back on. There's a little vibration thing, a little heat thing back here, like a styrofoam piece we'll put back before the intake manifold goes back on. Yeah, so that's it. Just plugging away, putting things on, not a whole lot to it. So I'll refilm the next milestone and just show you what's been done. Everything was going so smooth, I just went ahead and put it all back together. This harness here is for the injectors. We're gonna leave them unplugged. We're gonna crank it over and just get that oil pump to start sucking up oil, get some oil flowing at a lower cranking RPM versus firing it straight up and getting 1500 RPM on a dry engine. We did end up getting a new torque strut. They were cheap enough, so just went ahead and put one in for the customer, no charge. Also, new hoses. Got this PCV hose and a new PCV valve, and this hose here we just went ahead and slapped on. No big deal. Intake manifold, new gasket. The throttle body, new gasket. I think that's pretty much it. I had to, if you noticed in the last shot of over here, I had to pull that ground strap off. This is supposed to go on here and then the ground over there. So no big deal, just swap that over. And I think that's it. Everything underneath is good and tight. Torque down the intake manifold underneath those two bolts. The exhaust is bolted down from underneath. Serpentine belt is on. I think that's it. So I'm waiting on an air filter. We're gonna get a brand new air filter. I should have had that on standby, but I didn't, so that'll come first thing in the morning. Then we'll hook our battery up and just crank it over to get that oil flowing. To get those torque converter bolts on, the engine's already been rotated a number of times, so I know nothing is binding. I know my timing is okay still, so I'm not worried about anything like that. We're just gonna, once we get an air filter, crank it over. All right, we'll see you guys tomorrow. All right, we got the new air filter in. We don't want to forget filling it up with oil. Doesn't matter what oil you use, it's only going to be in the vehicle for about 20 minutes. So next I'm going to fill up the coolant. Make sure our drain plug is shut. And then as we're filling it up, just watch for any leaks. And I lost a little transmission fluid, so I'll top that off as well. Injector's unplugged, so it won't start. Let's crank it over. Gotta hook up the battery. That'd be helpful. And we want to crank it long enough for our oil light to go out. We've already cranked it over enough for it to go out, but let me just crank it over again and you'll watch that light go out. And that's what you want. So once the light's out, we know that there's enough oil pressure. The pump is working. There's oil flowing throughout the engine. All right, time to fire it up for reals. I got the injectors back in place. One thing else also to check is to make sure that you're not leaking any fuel. When we cycled the key a few times, when we did the pre-start, just to get the oil pumped up, the fuel rail should have pumped up with fuel. We just check around our injectors and fuel rail to make sure we're not leaking. Everything looks good. Double check to see if there's any reasons why we shouldn't proceed. And I don't see any reason. Let's do it. Sounds good. We might have a partial misfire, but I don't want to run it too long. So what I'm going to do is fire it up, let it run, let it warm up a little bit, see if that misfire goes away. We did have misfire codes before we started. I replaced those two coils because they were cracked, but it could be one of these other aftermarket coils. Just isn't doing the job like it should. So we may need another coil. If that is the case, then we'll just get 2 coils, and that'll be a total of 4 new coils. But let's see if it goes away. Also, things will be smoking a little because of grease and stuff getting on the exhaust and all that stuff. That's normal. It did puff blue smoke at first. That's normal because of how we did the cylinders, coating them with oil and stuff like that. That will burn off and go away. Also, when doing this, we want to keep an eye on that temperature gauge as well, just to be sure we're not overheating. But we'll want to take the RPMs up to 2,000, and we'll want to flutter it between 2 and 3 grand. Just keep fluttering it. Every once in a while, let it idle for a second, bring it back up, let it flutter, and that'll be our initial seat. We want to do that for 20 minutes, and then we'll change the oil. So hopefully you can see this. Cylinder number 3 is the only one that seems to be misfiring at the moment. So I'm going to pull the coil. I'm going to put one of the original Toyota coils back in. I already popped that coil out. And that is one of the aftermarket coils that they had in. So that could be under warranty. Sometimes those aftermarket coils come with a lifetime warranty, so I'll let the customer know that they may be able to just warranty it out if they still have that receipt information and stuff. Hopefully that'll get rid of our misfire. And there we go, 0 misfires. Perfect. Now we can go through seating our piston rings properly. All right, there we go. That is pretty much it. After the initial 20 minutes, we want to go ahead, drain the oil, change the filter, put in fresh oil. What we're using is a special break-in oil. A few different manufacturers make it, but it says on it, break-in oil, especially formulated for breaking in new or rebuilt engines. After that, we want to drive it for 50 miles. You want to vary your speed, vary your RPMs, accelerate, decelerate. So good in-town driving, good country driving where you have the opportunity to speed up, slow down, speed up, slow down. Do that for 50 miles, come back, drain the oil, change the filter one more time, and then put in oil again for 500 miles. And once you go past the 500 miles, then you're good to go. And just drive it like normal every day. All right, well, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. See you on the next one. All right, we went our 50 miles. And just to show you, I pulled codes again. So P1135, so it's that heater or that air fuel sensor heater circuit is back, but no misfire codes, no other codes. So we look pretty good. So now we're gonna drain the oil, fill it back up, and hand it off to the customer. And then in 500 miles, we'll want to do another oil change, and then that's it. From then on, drive it like normal.